evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and somehow, someway, the Demons have pulled off a miracle, coming from 24 points down against the reigning premiers, the Brisbane Lions, on their home turf to snatch a famous victory. Well, that's a sentence I never imagined I'd be saying just a few weeks ago. Joining me tonight to analyse a win for the ages is George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Ben Man. Good evening to all our listeners. And the real question on everybody's lips this week is, did Ben Man get onto the Demons at over $5 on the betting markets this week?
Well, he'll answer that in a second because he's the happiest man at Demonland at the moment. Good evening, Ben Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. No, George, the answer is no. My betting partners have long since banned me from backing any Demons games. They claim without evidence, but with years of raw data that my normal objectiveness about punting seems to go out the window when it comes to the D's. So, no, I watched on, but just on the punt, and I will touch on this no doubt through the show, as I've talked about, as regular listeners over the last 3 or 4 seasons will know, is if you're a punter, now's the time for anomalous results from this block of time for the next 3 or 4 weeks as teams come into their bye periods and they're staggered through this stage, which creates all of these strange sorts of situations where one team might be just coming off their break and teams all at different stage in their high performance programming and where they're loading and all of those sorts of things. So you get a lot of anomalous, strange results at this time of year in a season that's already been full of really strange results. And as I talked about a few weeks ago, I'll do a bit of a data dive on this, but I have already, but the winning margin this year is significantly higher at the same point in the season as it has been for a very long time, and that's part of that anomalous results and games like the Dogs versus Bombers games, and there's just some really weird results, and this was one of them. And geez, wasn't it fantastic? How exciting to get a win over the Lions, who I grudgingly admire, but they are full of players. Well, one in particular, Zorko, that drive me absolute spare, and it was great. It was terrific, wasn't it? It was terrific to think at 3/4 time, I wonder how this is going to go. It's going to be another heartbreaker, and for us to win was just terrific. And I couldn't have been more thrilled with watching us win.
Yeah, it was an unexpected win as well. Look, I don't think many people, maybe those with the rose-coloured glasses probably thought we were a chance, but when we were 24 points down, I thought, this is 70 or 80 points that we're going to be looking at. But we always kept plugging back. But it got to 3/4 time, and I thought, based on past experience from the past few weeks, I thought they're just going to run over us. But credit to the boys. They dug deep, and maybe Brisbane are in a loading phase because they look like they're running in concrete. We'll get into a bit later, but can't take anything away from the effort that our guys put in. And
No, and look, I know we'll touch on that, but to me, it's important that it's sort of considered, and there's a discussion about it, but doesn't take away from the win, and nor does playing poorly because you're doing a loading phase take away from a hard-fought win when a team is on the up, but they maybe could have beaten a team by 6 goals and only beat a lower team by 5 points. I watched the game twice back to back, so I watched it live and then watched it again, and I was super, super impressed, regardless of where the Lions are at in terms of their program and stuff. I was super impressed at the attitude of the players. Twice during the game, they got a break and really hurt us, opened us up, and it was that classic example. We didn't take advantage of our momentum. The ball gets turned over, goes up the other end, and they do. The gap in skills really was evident at one point. I was so proud of the way that the team didn't drop their heads and held the ground. There was a period in the third quarter where we just held ground. That's all we needed to do. And it was, I thought, a really, really gritty performance. And again, we'll get into it, but I thought a really good coaching performance from Goody as well.
Just as you were talking on betting, this is to make this about betting, where Victoria from Facebook sent a message in the other day, said, well, I'm looking forward to the podcast this week, fellas. Thanks for your commentary. Advice needed. My son has been learning about odds and ratios, etc. After learning Melbourne was $4.95 to win, he asked to bet $10 on a win, and I said no. How do I explain going for Melbourne is a journey and can lift and break your heart in the space of 7 days? This was before the game. Oh, no, Sunday, 6 o'clock. Maybe it was after the game.
Sorry, and just one last thing on the odds is, and I tried ChatGPT, gave me nothing on this. It said that without access to historical betting trends, I was like, well, that's what I'm asking for you. You know, anyway,
maybe
I shouldn't
they
really get angry at ChatGPT.
They maybe haven't plugged that in because they don't want to.
Well, there's things that I don't have access to. Anyway, it doesn't have. Is when was the last time the D's? So we were the longest odds to win this game. So of any match, of all 9 matches this round, we were the team that was the longest odds to win. We actually started $5.10, which in betting, like for a footy game, is like that. You know, that is it's North Melbourne versus
North
Brisbane
Melbourne beat us.
Level. And I tried to find out when was the last time we began a round of football and were the longest price team to win a game of footy of any of the teams playing. Couldn't find it out, but I suspect the very last time that happened was maybe when Paul Roos was coaching in his first season, when we were struggling to win. You know, I don't know how many games we win that season, 2 or 3 in his first season. So I reckon that would be the last time that we would have entered a round of footy being the longest price team to win. So, you know, it makes the victory even more, terrific, doesn't it? No, but your answer, George, I didn't get just joy from it, no money.
But just to answer Victoria, I don't know how old her son is, so gamble responsibly.
Well, Victoria, here's my tip: is betting is about not selecting winners. Betting is selecting value. That's where punters who win, it's about betting value. So plenty of times I've backed horses, for instance, that I didn't necessarily think would win. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but they were over the true odds of what I thought were. So were Melbourne over the true odds at 490? Well, in hindsight, yes, but we'll get into this a bit later, is that the anomalous result stuff is that potentially that's a factor. But, it's certainly pretty long, that's for sure.
All right, well, let's do the housekeeping. Each week I ask our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we truly appreciate your feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we give you a well-deserved shout-out, especially to those who take that time to share their reviews. Cassian66 writes, essential listening for D's fans, insightful, passionate, and always engaging. Demonland Podcast is a perfect combination, perfect companion for any Melbourne supporter. Andy, George and Big Man break down every game with thoughtful analysis and genuine love for the club. A must listen each week. Thanks for that review, Cassian. Much appreciated. Keep that feedback coming and simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll give you a shout out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter and you want to leave feedback, ask a question, share a comment like Victoria did, you can do so under our weekly podcast post, or like she did, slide into our DMs. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. You can download, listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And you can also watch and listen to the show on YouTube. Find our channel and subscribe. And if you want to connect with other Demons fans, check out our website at demonland.com. Sign up, join in the conversation with fellow D's fans from across Australia and around the world. You can post questions and comments for the show, or you can just join in on endless discussions on all things Melbourne Demons. If you want to jump on the air tonight, we've got a little bit of a different way to contact us. There is a link on demonland.com where you can just click on the link. It'll connect via your browser to Microsoft Teams. You don't have to have anything installed. Just put in your name and jump on, and then same rules. You'll just be on mute, and that was actually Microsoft Teams opening. Just did that now. So I'll bring you on when there's a break in the conversation, so just hang by if you can. Our chat room's back. demonland.com/podcast. If you're listening live, jump on there and you can chat with us there while we're doing the show. And we do go live.
Before you go on, Andy, we've got 3183 in the chat room who, quote unquote, the first time I've tuned in for the beginning of the pod. Fantastic. G'day, 3183D.
There you go. And I see Terence is also in there. He's talking about Dane Zorko, our favourite person. Did you see Track vigorously pulling Zorko off Sparrow after he drove him into the ground? Yes, I did see that. And I was quite happy that Track showed a bit of mongrel there, because Track's always won. You know, when there's a ball up, he's always won. And not many players in the AFL do this, where they'll give their hand to let up an opposition player.
Well, we don't mind that. That's okay. But
No. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just saying I notice he's like that. So you don't often see Track get angry like that, because usually...
Well, I don't know if there's not really quick, but I reckon his body language and his whole energy has been fantastic, Track, in the last few weeks. If he, like 2 weeks in a row, he's had a nearly game where just fumbled at the last, but if he cleans that up, he's in ripping form. But I really like his role modelling, and I really liked, speaking of Niggle, I really, really liked the Bison, Langford getting into the opposition, and it might have been after that incident. So, yeah, I was super pleased that was a 50 because it took out the likelihood of a miss. It didn't go down to 100%. We can still miss from the goal square, but it got pretty close.
All right, let's get into the match overview. In a stirring display of belief and determination, the Narm Demons pull off one of the most impressive heists of the 2025 AFL season, storming home with a 32-7 final quarter blitz to upset the reigning premiers, Brisbane, by 11 points at the Gabba. It was a performance built on elite pressure, midfield dominance, and a ruck masterclass from Max Gawn. It also signalled that the Demons, left for dead after an 0-5 start, are back in the fight, not just for credibility, but maybe, just maybe, for finals contention. And trailing by 14 points at the final change and having played catch-up all day, the Demons flipped the script. They surged in the final term, kicking 4 goals 8 to 1 goal 1, while suffocating the Lions with relentless forward half pressure. The midfield hunted. The forward line was functional, albeit not as accurate as I would have liked, and the back six locked down. It was complete football at a time when it mattered most. And Coach Simon Goodwin hailed the win as a product of belief and hard work. He said, internally, we know we've been building for the last month. The boys have been unbelievable, and today was a reward for effort. At the heart of the win was veteran forward Jake Melksham, who turned back the clock with a match-winning 4-goal performance. And from the moment he slotted the opening goal inside the first minute, Melksham played with urgency and purpose, getting the better of Brisbane co-captain Harris Andrews in a matchup that swung heavily in the incredible Melk's favour. Melksham finished with 11 disposals, 8 score involvements and 3 tackles inside 50, aside from one first-quarter brain fade that gave away a 50-metre penalty, as well as an unnecessary specky attempt in the last. His game was close to flawless. It was a performance steeped in leadership, maturity, and a clear sense of occasion. Captain Max Gawn delivered yet another colossal effort in the ruck, with Brisbane's Oscar McInerney a late withdrawal. Gawn made light work of replacement Darcy Fort, winning 53 hitouts, collecting 22 disposals and racking up 8 clearances. His dominance was pivotal in giving Narm an 18-11 edge at centre bounces and allowed their midfielders to gain ascendancy after a tough opening term. Even Brisbane coach Chris Fagan couldn't help but heap praise on the now 7-time All-Australian. Max is the best ever. He's a tremendous player and a weapon for them. Clayton Oliver continued his reinvention as a tagging midfielder, this time shadowing dual Brownlow medalist Lachie Neale. Whilst Neale finished with 30 disposals, Oliver limited his influence in key moments and outpointed him around stoppages. The 4-time best and fairest winner also won 13 contested possessions, had 7 clearances and kicked a vital third-quarter goal. Goodwin lauded Oliver's selfless role post-match. He said, that's what leadership looks like, putting the team first and doing what's needed. He's evolving and it's great to see. Cozzy Pickett was electric with 21 disposals, 12 score involvements, despite finishing with 2 goals for. His movement, creativity and forward half pressure kept the Lions' defence on edge all day. Christian Petrarca was again prolific with 31 touches, continually surging the ball forward and linking up inside 50. And Trent Rivers and Jake Bowie were composed and creative out of defence, with Rivers also pushing forward to hit the scoreboard. Bailey Fritsch, as the sub, made an immediate impact after replacing Harry Sharp in the third, contributing a goal and a few key forward half plays. The D's were behind at every change and trailed by as much as 24 points early in the second quarter, but refused to be buried. Gawn's dominance allowed Melbourne to stabilise around the ball, while Brisbane faltered under pressure. Their typical slick ball movement began to unravel, and their entries inside 50 lost bite. And by the final term, the Demons' superior effort, fitness and hunger overwhelmed a Lions side that, in Fagan's words, was annihilated in the last quarter. With 4 wins from their last 5, the Demons' season is very much alive. The Gabba is one of the hardest venues in football, and knocking off the reigning premiers there after a horror start to the season is a feat not to be underestimated. This was a win born of desperation, grit and a renewed sense of identity. The veterans led, the midfield fired and the system held. For the first time in 2025, the D's are starting to look like themselves again. Big man. You got some stats for us.
Indeed, I do. Thanks, Andy. There was really interesting. You mentioned the senior players stood up, and that was reflected in the player ratings. And there was some. So our highest rated player. Who would you guess our highest rated player was in the game, Andy?
Well, it wasn't Gawn, you'd think, no? Or Melksham for the goals?
No, and I should do this research before because I'm good.
I see you.
Trent Rivers was our highest rated player.
Yeah, that doesn't
21.3, and the research I suggested that I should do is that it has to be in his top 3 or 4 highest rated games. So, reminder, in the industry, 20 is considered an all-Australian level game of football, and he was 21.3. He's almost a senior player now, isn't he? So, what game? How many?
Rivers.
Trent Rivers.
Yeah.
Would you consider him a senior player?
He's sort of been fast track because he sort of had to. I'd say he's there. He's in that.
He was our highest rated player and had a terrific game, a really good game. Just the thing with the player ratings is that it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best player, and so it doesn't really measure influence. So, as an example of that, our 5th rated player was Jake Melksham, and I reckon so. His score was 15.6 for the game, but you could mount a very strong argument to say he doesn't play, we don't win that game. We'll unpack that a little bit later in the discussion about the tactics. Second on the list. Awesome game of footy. Clayton Oliver, 20.5. I think we're going to have to wait till he does another full pre-season for him to get his sort of acceleration back. So we accept that he's going to be slowish off the mark, but that was a huge game of footy. There was talk afterwards that he broke even, or that who was his opponent? Lachie Neale broke even. He gave Lachie Neale a complete bath. His numbers, he actually had more possessions. I think 30-odd possessions, Lachie Neale, and 6, but only 6 clearances. He's key to their clearance game. Clayton had 7. As George has noted, and I think it's worth noting, he didn't tag him, he ran with him, and he looked to sort of reference him and limit his impact. And I thought he did a really good job of that. He was awesome. So 20.5 is his highest player rating since the Port game in 2023, the week before, or maybe the week that he did his hammy back into middle of 2023. So fantastic performance, 20.5. Track. Another awesome game. He's been playing fantastic. So our 17.2, great opening quarter, 6 points in the first quarter. Maxi was our 4th highest rated player. Just a solid game for him at 16. He's just an all-Australian lock. And he's apparently in some betting market, or in some sort of markets around measuring the Brownlow, he's already up to 12 votes in the Brownlow, if you believe some of the stuff. And then Jakey Melksham rounded out the top 5 with 15.6, again, you could put a strong case together that he was the most influential player on the ground in terms of the result. He just did a complete number on, speaking of beating opponents. I thought Andrew showed him zero respect and paid the price. He continually set up really aggressively in front of him, which is how Andrew plays. But like that first goal was a classic example. We got a goal within the first 60 seconds because that was Andrew, because Andrew's decided to pay no respect to Jake Melksham and let him climb all over him.
This is at least the second time that Jake's done that to him.
The first I thought of you, Andy, he was interviewed post-game on the ground. Did you see that?
He gets angry when you talk about defensive forward. I'm never asking him that again. I'm telling you, he does not like that. I don't know why, because it is what that role. I think he objects.
I couldn't help but
he objects to
because he was asked about it, and he was at pains to say he wasn't even asked whether the defensive forward. He was just asked about the role on Andrews, and he said something like, I played him. But, he's at pains to say he's not a defensive forward.
I know. I think he just objects to that label just because he thinks, and he is, but that he's not just that. And he isn't just that.
He's not just that.
It is just used to describe that particular role on those particular days.
Oh, totally.
And he's very good at it.
A complete number on Andrew. It's so much so that Andrew's got taken off him and moved forward.
He went to full forward, yeah.
They waved the white flag on Jake Melksham, and just quickly, some of his kicking just shows the difference. I mean, like I've been banging on about it since Adam was a boy, about kicking and the importance of kicking skill. But that left foot kick he did to drill inside to Sparrow, the one that he got the 50 from that we were talking about, that was just a total thing of beauty. And that the kick that he did wasn't as sort of aesthetically attractive kick, but the little dink kick that he did to Langdon was just so clever. Like he knew all he needed to do was get it into space. For him to be able to think that and then execute it in that time, in the time he had, was just ended up being a match. It shut the door.
That was probably the sealer.
Yeah.
Mind you, thank God the umpires can't tell sometimes went 15 metres or not, because maybe it went 15 metres in the air.
10. Oh, no, that was 15. I thought that was
went 15 one. Up in the air and down.
Yeah. I thought that was all right, that one. So just on the umpiring, I thought the umpiring was actually pretty good, I have to say. So after last week,
considering I've been to Brisbane, and sometimes they really get the rub of the green, as they say.
My main metric for his umpiring good is that you don't notice him, and I didn't notice him. That's the number one.
And there was only one or two boos from the opposition, so yeah.
Daniel, just some other notables. Daniel Turner had a great game in defence, 15.5. He was our sixth highest rated player.
Do you agree with me? He's very good on the ground as well as in the air.
Isn't he? So agile as well. A couple of times he balked in this match. He is a terrific young player. He was, as I said at the beginning of the season, he was my tip for a breakout. It didn't look so good when he got dropped, but
no. But I think he's really he's reaching that tier that he's up there as our key defenders, and we'll talk later about whether he's key forward, key defender, swingman or not. But
I love the idea of him and Petty being swingmen, and adds real flexibility. Jake Bowie had another good game, but just a couple of other ones. Last week, I noted how important our young players were, and just to show, I guess, how hard this sport is, and backing up, down near the bottom. Harrison Petty was our lowest rate player, negative 1.5 for the match. Sharp, negative 1.2. Windsor sort of carried on his pretty sort of, just middling form, but he was next, 0.2. But above them was Xavier, Lindsay and Langford. So those two players were in our top 5 players last week. Langford had a remarkable 16 or 17 points or whatever it was. So back down to earth this week, 4.3 for X, and for the Bison, 2.4. It's a tough game, but both did their role. And just to highlight,
I thought Lindsay was very, very good. I thought
very good.
Excellent third quarter.
Yeah, I thought he was good too. And I mean, again, this is the sort of like it's just a data point, but it's the way each. I thought he did his role. He did some good things. He's going to be a total jet, isn't he? But we've talked a lot about this fella the last few weeks, and I've been pretty harsh on Bailey. Credit where it's due. He came on, made an immediate impact. He scored 7 points, player rating points in, I think he played 37% game time. I don't think I know I'm reading it right here. So, and 5.8 of those points were in the last quarter. He tackled well. I thought his energy was terrific, did exactly what he needs to be doing. So big shout out to him. And he ran.
We've got
really
a question later just about him and the subs, so we'll save that for then.
Yeah. So did
you watch any of the Essendon Bulldogs game?
I watched it all. Yeah. I had had some bets on that game.
Did you hear the anomaly with the player rating system during that game? With Bailey Dale had 39 possessions to 3/4 time, and there were 6 players ahead of him in the player ratings.
I did, but that's what drives me nuts about these whackers on TV, though, George, because that means nothing. Like that whole point about, so what, disposals don't, like I thought we've moved way past.
But he was absolutely dominating that game.
He was, but a lot of those disposals were just rubbish kicks around the back half. So the way the player rating works is each kick, each involvement in the game is measured on a scale. I think it's 0 to -6. 0 to +6, about its impact on the team scoring or not scoring. And so a lot of those stats, I did watch that game, a lot of those stats were junk stats. And a lot of it was, he's going to break the Bulldogs all-time possession record, which he ended up doing. I mean, so that it didn't actually, I did hear that exact comment, and my thought was, George, to be perfectly honest, a guy, whoever that was, should go read what the definition of the player rating is and work it out, because it's not like he wasn't necessarily the best player on the ground. He was the player with the most disposals on the ground. And that's a bit like saying Maxi got 100 more tap outs. It doesn't really it's not that meaningful. So I don't think he was, I reckon he wasn't the best player on the ground. There were more influential players, but yeah, I did hear that that comment. Where was I? So the stats files. So as I said, Clary's best rating since mid-23, right before he did his hammy. So all power to him. Speaking of hit-outs, good. We had 36 more hit-outs in this game. So 53 to 17 really helped with setting up the ground in terms of our structure and getting territory. But again, it didn't, I'll talk about the middling stats in a sec. So hit-outs to advantage. We only had 9 hit-outs to advantage, which +7. They only had 2 hit-outs to advantage. I think a massive part of this game was McInerney. When did that get announced? He wasn't playing.
A late withdrawal.
Yeah, just before the game.
Was it? Right. Yeah. Well, if I wasn't banned from betting Melbourne, if I'd heard that early enough, I would have put a pretty strong lobby for us to.
Mind you, they won a grand final without him.
They did, but it just really massive advantage. Look at that, 53 hit-outs to 17. Yeah. It doesn't, of course, translate into necessarily into clearance dominance, and it didn't, as I'll touch on in a sec. But it certainly helps with getting territory
and the ground to ground as well. He plays pretty well around the ground.
Totally, absolutely. So I thought that was good. Hit-outs to advantage, +7. They only had 2 hit-outs to advantage. It's pretty, remarkable how well they did with their clearances. In terms of the pressure, our pressure individually, I'll get to the collectively in a sec, which wasn't so great. But our top 5 pressure players was Clary. His season average is 53.8 pressure points. He had 74 in this match. Massive. Cozzy was second. Tommy Sparrow third. Track. He averages only 36.7 pressure points compared to Claz's 50.38, and he had 45 in this match. Massive game from Track from that perspective. Sort of speaks to what I was saying before about his sort of energy and body language. Rounding out the top 5 was Eddie Langdon, who averages 29, but in this match was 38, so averages 29.9. Impressive from Ed Langdon. Our contest was pretty good. We were +12 for post-clearance possessions, as I've talked about. Hardwick has long said that's the most important stat in footy. They're smashing it, the Suns, in that stat, not surprisingly. We got back on the horse in terms of tackles inside 50 this week. Tackles inside 50, 9 to 4. So +5 for tackles inside 50. This stat was really interesting. So first possession to clearance percentages was really interesting. They've got a fantastic, Lockie Neal certainly was negated somewhat by Oliver, but he's a total gun, isn't he? And their midfield is to die for. Got so many players who can run through there and be damaging. So first possession to clearance is also increasingly an important stat, one that I know that the coaches put a lot of stock in. We were 80.9% of the time we converted a first possession to a clearance. They were 80.5, so 0.4% more than them doesn't sound much. Our season average is 75, so well above our season average. 0.4 above them doesn't sound much, except for the fact that they are so bloody good at clearances. Certainly, the big Mac not being in there didn't help them. So just as this is for Wheelo put this note on Demonland in the stats file thread. So first possession to clearance is the percentage of how many times you convert a first possession to clearance. Our first 5 games, we percentage 60.8, 70%, 65.6, 66.7 and 72% of the time we converted a first possession to clearance. AFL average is 75.5. So in the first 5 matches, we did not meet AFL average once converting first possession in the clearance percentage. But in our last 5 games, that's changed right around 82.5%, 82.1, 77.8, 83.7, and as I said in this match, 80.9. Overall, season average is 74.4. For us, our AFL average is 75.5. The AFL average is 75.5. So on that ladder, on the table, we're 14th in the AFL for converting the first possession to clearance, the percentage for doing so. But over the last 5 games, we're averaging 81.2% and second best in the AFL over the last 5 games, which really, really demonstrates a bit about how good he's trying to play, about that focus on forward half pressure, that focus on the contest and the focus on contested possessions. There's some seriously good numbers. The biggest individual improvers are track, 58% in the first 5 weeks. In the last 5 weeks, 83% first possession to clearance percentage. Viney, 64 to 92%. In the first 5 games, Viney only 64% of time converting that first possession to clearance. And in the last 5 games, he's played 92. I know he didn't play the last 2. Gawn, 58% to 85. And Pickett's he's been about the same. So it really demonstrates how, the way Goody wants us to play. He's talked about our increased intensity, and we can see it on the field. In terms of turnover, was good. So we scored 62 points from turnover, and that's a direct correlation to that sort of pressure. So you win contested, you win plus 12 for post-clearance possessions. I think we were, plus 12 for maybe more. I'll get in a sec for contested possessions. As I mentioned, terrific game for converting post-clearance, first possession to clearance percentages. But our intensity was really good, and that was reflected in a turnover scoring 62. They scored 48, which is not too bad, but we were plus 14 from scores from turnover. That was a big factor in the game. This was great. Our expected score, it wasn't great that we didn't get our expected score, was 113.2. Theirs was 85.9, so just a tick under what they actually scored, 88. That expected score, according to Willow, is our expected score of 113 is our 5th highest since the start of 2021. So super impressive there. So we were 14 and a bit below what our expected score. This was really impressive too, and this was sort of partly explained how, really Goody would be thrilled with this number. 50% of the time we went inside, we scored. Scores per inside 50 were 50%. They were only 43%, so plus 6.6%. We kicked 6 of the last 8 goals, which is awesome, particularly given the background to our final quarters and how we've been travelling. And we did most of our damage really in the front half, scoring 9-8, 62 from chains starting in our front half. The Lions, conversely, there was a lot of talk in the commentary about how well they were moving the ball from the back half. Overblown. to an extent. I thought our defensive unit did a brilliant job in that respect, but yeah, they certainly did move the ball with precision at times, and their foot skills were, some of their foot skills were just awesome. They only scored 2 goals for 16 points from their forward half. That's a huge difference. I mean, it's 46 points difference. Again, it speaks to the way Goody wants to play, which is, still forward. We forward half very similar to the way the Suns are playing, and also, as I've mentioned before, Collingwood. Middling, not so much bad, but curious and not great. Our team pressure, we were down 16 in the first quarter, 165 to 181. And in the last quarter, 155 to 148. For the match, 165, 169. That's our lowest pressure rating for some time. In some ways, the game was like that when there's lots of uncontested possessions. They had something like 25, 30 more uncontested possessions than us, which I thought was a curious number. That will, by definition, reduce the pressure ratings because there's less physical contacts and tackles and whatnot. But really, that's a pretty low team pressure, actually. Our kicking efficiency, I'll put this in the middling, remarkably, we were 65.8, which is very middling, but they were 65.1. And so as much as some of their kicking was great, they also did some terrible turnovers. And when you could really notice them when they're your team. You tend to just gloss over them when they're the opposition. But they did have some howlers of kicks, which probably goes a long way to explain how we did so well from scores from turnover. Just so bad. Defensive half to forward 50%. That's proportion of all chains starting in the defensive half that resulted in inside 50. Chains include kick-in chains, clearances, intercepts with at least one disposal in the chain. Defensive half to forward half chains were 41% of the time they got it from their defensive 50 to their inside their own 50. We could only do that 27.9, so they smashed us in that regard, and that was really evident in those first 3 quarters. The positive, though, is that the defensive half to score was only 3.3 percentage different. We scored 13.1% of the time from our defensive half to score, and they only were 16.5. So as well as they moved the ball down the ground from their back half, we stood up really, really well once they got it inside 50. And I thought that was a massive part of the game. Is their biggest threat, as I mentioned last week on the podcast, is how their fleet of medium-sized players like Zach Bailey and the like. We really did a good job of them. McVee was brilliant, I thought, on Cameron. Bowie had another terrific game. I thought we did a really good job to negate their what I think is their one wood. Fletcher, all of those medium goal kicking mids who can push forward. Very impressive unit they've got in that. But we really made it difficult for them to score once they got inside 50, despite how easily they moved it at different times. So just the curious stats finally, just to wrap it up. I thought this one for you, George. Who had the most, including Max Gawn, who do you think had the most centre bounce attendances?
Ooh.
I know the answer, but George?
Well, you get the answer, Andy.
Was it Christian Petrarca?
It was. Was Christian Petrarca. 29 centre bounce attendances, 3 more than Max Gawn.
And do you know how I know that? One of our lovely listeners provided that in one of the questions.
Right, there you go. I did read that. So next was Max Gawn, Clayton Oliver, and Cozzy Pickett had 22. So way up. His season average this year is 71, so he had 22 times. He was inside 50. And some of the other curious stuff that we'll probably unpack a little bit is time on ground. Track had massive time on ground. Clary had plus, I think he was at around 85. It was the younger players that had a bit of a chop out this week. But I thought that was a curious part of the game, how often Track was in the middle. It was quite a thing. So
probably had to pick up a bit of the slack, and the same with Cozzy in the absence of Viney in the middle.
Yeah,
somebody else has got to pick up.
Yeah, and also they seem sort of a bit averse to running any of the younger players through, and I wonder whether the younger players are sort of struggling to. I mean, this is the time of year, regardless of the loading discussion, is that they really start wanting that break, the younger players. So
yeah, and given Brisbane's midfield, you really don't want to be throwing too many young kids in there. They've got a seriously big group of seriously good midfielders. So.
Yeah, they've got all these players that look all the same, young.
Yeah.
That's like, come on.
What's frightening is the ones that weren't there in this game. No Lincoln McCartney, no Berry, no Starcevic, and McInerney, and they bat so deeply in the midfield, and they're always the ones that absolutely destroy us and other teams.
Which is partly why I was so impressed with our defensive unit. It was. I thought defensively it was a really good performance, and I mean they definitely they've even Zorko's a brilliant kick. Trackett felt like he was just on the edge of just having a monster game. He fumbled a few times. His kicking lets him down, of course, as we've talked about. But his energy was great, and he just feels like he's at any stage, he could take a game apart and get back to the track of old. Still feel, I don't know about what you guys feel, but sometimes it feels a little bit like he's still feeling his way into the game in terms of the physical contact, which would be 100% understandable. But maybe I'm reading too much into it.
The one stat that really stood out for me in this game was contested marks.
Yes, that's why I wanted to highlight that one.
Absolutely pants them in this. And what was really telling for me was because contested marks are gold, but the number of times that our contested mark was absolutely, utterly essential. Max did two great ones in the last couple of minutes of the game. And you go, well, that's a match saver, but there was one by Turner, which was superb. Petty,
beautiful running back with the flight. I hope that
Petty a couple of times, provided the link. There was another really absolutely essential. Oh, Stephen May.
He took a beauty, didn't he?
Just to completely turn the tide. If he didn't do that, it was over the top and goodbye. They're off to the races. But I think it was 11-7 or something on contested marks.
11-5. You're right to highlight that, because I reckon it was a big factor in the game, because it also helps teams control territory, doesn't it? 11-5 is massive, and also 16 marks inside 50 to 11, and 16 is a pretty good sort of indicator of how well we move the ball at times. Just on the ball movement, they scored. This is the sort of the bad one that I missed, is they scored. Where is it? From the back half, their scoring was. They scored 58 points of their, what did they end up? 81. 58 of their points were scored from the back half, defensive half, not from the inside 50, from the defensive half, against the season average that we've given up 41. We only managed 28 ourselves. Our season average is 25. But, you think about how many of their goals in the first half came from sort of cutting us open with their kicking, and there was some
just their ball movement, the handballs.
Yeah.
Every time out of a pack, they just handball, bang, down through the middle. Kicking just.
Just one final thing, just a thought on Clary. That goal that he helped create for Fritter, where he desperately hit it forward, that says to me there's a young bloke, Clary, who is trying his bloody guts out, and for me that's the very first thing. Like everything else is whatever it is, but like effort is non-negotiable, and that effort got us a goal. It's just brilliant bit of play.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into our questions. Clintosaurus says, strength and conditioning showed out strong today, a sign of things to come, perhaps. Garbo says, would love to hear your take on why we ran out the game so well this week, despite struggling throughout the season, or why Brisbane, typically one of the strongest final quarter teams, fell away. Have we turned a corner in this regard? My theory is that our turnover issues have made us work twice as hard, leaving us gassed in previous games. Red and Bluebeard says, that was a win for the ages. One thing that stood out to me was our attitude and intensity, especially in the last quarter. We left a few goals out there for sure, but we kept at it with plenty of second, third and fourth efforts as required. And if a mistake was made, we just kept on going without dropping our heads. It reminded me of our best a few years ago when the last quarter was always ours, mainly due to intensity, pressure and 1%ers. With some tidier skills, including better goal kicking, we're not too far away from our win over Brisbane in the qualifying final in 21. A stretch, I know, but a demon can dream. Harvey Warbanger writes, perhaps a full and unreserved apology to our fitness team. Helps a lot when you get to choose from a pretty healthy list. With Viney and Lever to return next Sunday, it seems only Marty Hall is unavailable from the 43 this week. And before I get your take on our fitness this week's fourth quarter, George, I just want to speak to Harvey's point, and I don't believe that we owe a full and unreserved apology to our fitness team. I'm always happy to admit when I'm wrong, and I have no issues being proven wrong. But one swallow does not a summer make. What I want to see is some consistency, and it was clear throughout the first 5 rounds and even in the game since that we've struggled to run our quarters, let alone entire matches, and our last quarters have been particularly poor, and that's not just down to injuries, although we've certainly had our fair share and some in games too, which it doesn't help. But having a healthy list will no doubt help with our consistency across the board. But I still think the question raised about our fitness and the program and the fitness program that we've had over the last few weeks has been fair based on our past performances. Now, this week's fourth quarter effort is absolutely outstanding, exactly the type of response that we've been waiting for and wanting. And I won't lie, I expected us to get overrun in the last, purely based on the past performances that we've seen. So to see the boys dig deep and get rewarded, it was fantastic. And Big Man, you've sort of touched a bit on the Lions' fitness and whether they're managing a loading phase because usually they finish strong, but and they did look like they were running in concrete at the end. But back to the Ds, that fourth quarter, it's the benchmark. It's what I want to see, that effort week in, week out. And if we can produce consistent 4-quarter efforts over the next few weeks, I'll be thrilled. So, let's be clear. I don't think that we're out of line for calling it how we saw it over the first 9 rounds. I don't think there's any need for us to apologise or for me to apologise for being honest about what was in front of us. So anyway, I just wanted to – I didn't think we needed to make an apology. George.
Agree with all of that, and I'm glad that Andy gave me this to talk to because Bin Man should be the one doing this, but I'm going to steal his thunder because I'm totally on board with what he's been sprouting for the last couple of years now. If you were the Brisbane fitness and conditioning staff and you wanted to get some extra miles into the legs of the guys at mid-season, and here we are 10 rounds into the season, you would pick the round that you're playing North Melbourne and Melbourne, teams that both finished in the bottom 4 last year, when you're playing at home. And so if they were going to do it, this was certainly going to be the round that they do it in. But they also did it last week, we suspect, with North Melbourne when they played down in Tassie, because exactly the same thing happened last week. When the week before when they played North Melbourne, they were Brisbane had complete control of the game. I think they would double their score in the first quarter, and then they completely died off. Same as what happened in this game. We were well and truly in the game, and around about 3/4 time, I thought, this is going to be an honourable loss for us. But they completely stopped again. All those runners, we saw them in the first 3 quarters, absolutely dashing through the middle of the ground. They weren't seen in that last quarter. They were just not seen. Their backmen were just as equally buggered, for want of a better word. The number of times kicking the ball out of their back line where they didn't actually make the distance. They were kicking to 2-on-1s, or they were kicking short, and I suspect because they were tired. They were genuinely tired. I think there was a very, very big loading factor in this. We took advantage of it, make no mistake. We still had to win that game, but Brisbane were nowhere near what Brisbane had been like previously, and I think the loading factor was the biggest single factor as to why they dropped off so dramatically in that last quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I sort of flagged it last week. There was a question about it, whether it was possible in the Roos game, to which I answered, yeah, it's more than possible. And just some numbers to sort of support that. As an example, the impact in the last couple of weeks of what I think they're probably, they're going through a phase where they're doing extra strength and or aerobic, perhaps both. Who knows? That's part of the problem of this not being sort of discussed in the media because, like you're exactly right, George. It doesn't. That's why I made the point where I was so impressed with Melbourne's effort. Like, it felt like when we were, say, against the Roos, they opened us up so quick in that last quarter. The Lions could have opened us up at 3 or 4 different times during that game, almost did when it went out to 24. And then I'd forgotten the second time I watched it, it went out to 24 twice. And so we brought it back in and then they went back out. If we weren't switched on and playing good footy and in a really good headspace to attack that game, it wouldn't have mattered whether they were loading or not. They would have got out to a 40, 50-point lead and we wouldn't have been able to pull it back in. But in terms of, potential evidence of what we're talking about, and again, it may not be right, but, I'd love the media to sort of stop with the pretend stuff of not discussing this stuff, because where does it leave it? Like that they weren't switched on or they underestimated their opponent, and all of that, maybe that's in the mix somewhere, but at least factor it in. You can always reject it as a theory, but at least factor it in. Against North, the Lions won contested ball inside their own 56-13 or 13-6 in the first half against North, but lost that 7-14 in the second half. A complete turnaround, as George said. The Roos kicked 7 of the last 9 goals. The D's kicked 6 of the last 8 goals. The Lions laid only 3 tackles in the final quarter against us. We completely smashed the Lions for territory in that last quarter, inside 50 and contested ball as well in that last quarter, whereas those stats are actually pretty much even for the first 3 quarters. In fact, the time in forward half ended up being almost 50-50 despite our dominance in that last quarter. So, that's not by way of downplaying our victory. It was a fantastic victory. Anytime you go to the Gabba under any circumstances and come away with a win, particularly with a group of young players and a new method, to take that every single day. It was an awesome performance, but I just think it's important to have, to sort of, or to factor in the potential, where the Lions were at. In horse racing parlance, they're maybe 2 runs into a 4 or 5 race Melbourne Cup campaign.
The other possibility is that the Lions actually had money on Melbourne at $5.
Yeah, that would be quite a controversial.
Paid for their end of season trip and beyond.
Yeah, back in the day, I'm sure that happened.
Track Forever asks, what do you think was the biggest difference in our game plan this week compared to previous weeks, or did we just execute better? So, Big Man, did you notice anything different that we did tactically this week, or did we just execute it better and for longer?
I thought it was, look, I've talked about this again. This is another hobby horse of mine. It just drives me nuts how watching it on television, how little they give you in terms of the analysis. So, there was, it's like they give little breadcrumbs that you're trying to piece together what's happening. So, particularly from a tactical point of view, you're really guessing, but you can't see what's happening on the screen. They don't give you any information. Their data's useless, and they don't explain anything. So what did they do differently to last week? I thought tactically it was really quite different. Last week I talked about the way Goody really got the team to sweat on that second handball from Hawthorn. I think the equivalent in this game was that they allowed that first chip, hence so many uncontested possessions, which I was really surprised actually how many more uncontested possessions they had than us. But we sweated on the next one. We sweated on the next kick, and as well as they did transition the ball, I thought they really did a good job in our defensive system in terms of the way we minimise the impact of all of those medium forwards. We really looked to work hard to chop off that second kick. So, at times they opened us up and they got away with it, but we were working really hard to do that. I reckon the contested possession contested marks was a really big factor, an important part of the way we played tactically. Sort of touching on my frustration with the coverage of it. In the first quarter, in the first half, they talked about the fact that the commentators, that is, we kept all our forwards forward instead of bringing a half forward flank up to stoppages. That was a curious thing. We don't actually bring, we haven't really ever done that under Goody, bring extra to stoppages. We're doing it more this year, but in the first half, if you believe what that comment was we were making a 6 versus 6 forward line. And I thought that really helped, for instance, with Melksham negating Andrews. I thought that was a pivotal contest in the game. Really went to work on Andrews. So tactically, it was I thought it was a really interesting game, but we know them obviously really well. We've had lots of games, and we really look to stop those sort of forward lead up passes that they love to do. And I think we gave them the first one and really worked hard to shut down that second one. So for the first 3 quarters, the suggestion was we weren't bringing in extra to stoppages. But in the last quarter, they mentioned, and again, I would have loved for them to unpack this or show the vision, we brought extras to the stoppages in the last quarter. I was wondering whether that's perhaps to take advantage of Maxi's dominance, which we really hadn't for the first 3 quarters. We did in the last quarter. So we brought extras up to the stoppages in the last. But again, I'm going from the sort of comments from the commentators. I think the other big tactical thing, there's no question that they looked to minimise the impact on in terms of the way they used Clary of Lockie Neal, and did a really good job. They talked about, well, maybe you should go on to McCluggage, and McCluggage was damaging, but it's a bit like you can't block all of the players. So I thought tactically that was a clear effort. They used Langford in a really curious way as a winger, basically, who was working back in defence. And it reminded me, someone put this on Demonland, and I thought it was a really good comment. Langford played a lot like the way Gus was playing in his last couple of seasons, dropping back as like a sort of wing, but more of like a defensive half-back flanker who I see a nod. George, did you think the same thing? That sort of smart player who can fall back, reads the ball well, and
Yeah, that's exactly what you hit the nail right on the head. He's a smart player. He knows where the ball's going and where to put it once he gets it. But yeah, he folds beautifully, and then he's got a magnificent kick and his ability to see where to. Yeah, he's if we want, you can never replace Gus as a player, but boy, is he a pretty good second option, and I think he'll be probably a better option long run.
Yeah, and I'd say the same about Lindsay. Lindsay knows how to get to the right spots as well. He's a smart player. He makes good decisions. Beautiful, can kick. The other thing that was really different to last week, so I think Goody this year tactically is being a lot. He won't get any kudos. I reckon as much as D's fans give him a hard time, no one gives him any credit for anything tactically he does in the media. It's unbelievable. I think this year, one of the big changes he's made, and I think he started last year, is moving more towards how Scott coaches for the Cats, which is taking into account the strengths of the opposition and modifying the method and game plan to mitigate and minimise the or attempt to take some of the strengths of the opposition away. He's never done that. Well, he did do that in 2017 to a lesser extent in 18, but in the really good period, 21 through to 23, we played our way and forced teams to play, to try and negate us. I think where he's being a lot more tactically flexible. And so, for instance, in this game, we had very few of those long handballs that we did last week. It looked very different in terms of how we were looking to move the ball. We looked like we were focused on mitigating their ball movement as our first thing and making sure our defensive structure was sorted out well. And it looked really sound behind the ball. They were, despite the fact that they scored 58 points from their defensive half, at times they really struggled. Even before I think the fatigue kicked in, they were struggling to move the ball forward. And I think that was a massive factor in our ability to stop that game blowing out to 30 points. 30 points is the magic number. Teams very rarely lose after going up 5 goals, and it was critical that we didn't allow them to do so. And we did. And again, going back to, I think, Melksham's performance on Andrews, negated Andrews, and I really think he was the difference. And so tactically, that was a big part of how the game was set up. And credit where it's due, tactically, the way they used Fritter was really, really clever. He came on and gave them exactly what we needed. He tackled hard. He ran up the ground. And, one of the reasons he's in the team, there's no doubt about it, is that he's a brilliant field kick. I know he missed that shot, but he hit a couple of beautiful field kicks. And, in a team that's lacking for elite kicks, it's, must be awfully hard to drop a player of his skill kicking-wise.
Bigfoot says, how immense was Max Gawn in those last 5 minutes? Those couple of contested marks, crucial to stopping any comeback by the Lions. We are so blessed to have such a courageous leader. And Rose Star says, Max, what more can we say? Saved us in the last. Spirit of Norn Smith says, Max Gawn is simply the greatest ever. Love how he punches the ball forward with grunt. 46 hitouts and 8 clearances. Max's interception marking was superb. Dutch Demon asks, so when are we going to build a statue of Max Gawn? So, George, guess it's a rhetorical question. How good is Max Gawn?
Yeah, I think we covered this off last week, and I think I had the job as well. We're
last 3 weeks.
Yeah, going to have to get the bronze statue petition going for outside the MCG for Max, because he is certainly up in the top echelon of great Melbourne players. But this so far this season, it's certainly been one of the best seasons of Max since 2021. Certainly comparable. I just love those 2 marks in that last 5 minutes of the game. That the game was absolutely on the line. It was going downfield, and Max took it when he needed to. He just put everything on the line himself. Absolutely. And so not just save the game, but then puts it straight back into attack for us in both those circumstances. So, can't give enough credit to Max in this game. Long may it continue.
Did you see after the game, there was footage of them coming off the ground, and there was a shot of Max sort of walking by himself. He wasn't didn't have a teammate right next to him, just screamed in yes, or whatever he's screaming. It was just a fantastic bit of footage, and it really demonstrated how much that win meant to them. And they came with a plan, they executed, and also I don't know, did you watch the song in the rooms afterwards? Yeah, there was a lot of passion there, wasn't there?
Belted it out, it was.
Yeah, another awesome performance. And though it keeps going like this, here's my tip for what the media will obsess over for a few weeks. Will he be the first Brownlow medal winner as a ruck since Teasdale? Oh, has there been one since Teasdale? There probably has been. Did Madden win one as a ruck? Anyway, for a long time.
Anyway. Scott Wind.
Scott Wind. Did he win?
Bulldogs. He won a Brownlow.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, whatever way you cut it. And,
that was it.
He must
Jimmy
have
Steins.
a few votes under his belt already. Well, it'll be interesting, won't it, to see if he does get votes. But, he had 15 contested possessions. He had the most contested possessions of any player on the ground. It's just outrageous. Yeah. And 5 post-clearance contested possessions.
Well, in previous years, he's never sort of got it because he's had Petrarca and Oliver stealing votes off him, but I don't know if they're going to be, so far, have stolen votes from him.
7 score involvements. God, it's unbelievable.
George?
And was it Victoria before with the betting with her son? There's been man's tips for to put the money on.
Don't back. If I wanted a tip, I reckon Harvey Langford to win the win the Rising Star. Yeah, the $6 at the moment.
So who's he up against? Levi Ashcroft, which the younger Ashcroft?
Ashcroft and just on the top of my head, there's Sullivan. Is he the Carlton player?
Finn. No, that's Jagger Smith. Finn O'Sullivan for North.
Sullivan, where's Finn O'Sullivan? He's
North, I think.
I think he's the sort of leader at the moment. But yeah, it's he's looking the goods, isn't he? Langford?
He's top 3 for sure. All right, let's get on with it. Lefty asks, I'd love to get the panel's thoughts on the backup ruck role that Aidan Johnson played yesterday. Max clearly needs a chop out during games. As much as we'd love him to ruck all day, it's just not realistic. He needs those breaks so that he can produce moments like we saw in the dying stages. At the same time, we don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul by dragging a forward like Petty or Rue out of the attacking 50, only to have them bashed up in the ruck and worn out from covering the extra ground. It also seems the selectors aren't overly keen on picking Campbell, and given this is Johnson's second call-up, he appears to be first in line for the role. On top of that, his ability to contribute as a forward and hit the scoreboard adds another string to his bow. So how did you assess his game, and do you think he's our best option in that backup ruck role going forward? Spirit of Norm Smith said, loved AJ as second ruck, just a Bullock-type player and gives 100%, all heart, and love the goal celebration. So, B-Man, we've had this discussion before, though it's usually been in context of JVR taking on the relief ruck duties, and this week Aiden got another look. We got another look at Aiden Johnson in that role. What did you make of his performance? And as a follow-up, assuming JVR returns to the side at some point, might not this week given the Casey performance, but how do you see the relief ruck setup evolving, and can AJ and JVR maybe realistically play in the same team, given our preference has been that JVR doesn't, our preference is JVR doesn't play in the ruck, but it seems that the coaching committee has no problem with that.
Just before I do, the Levi Ashcroft is $2 favourite to win the Rising Star, and Harvey's second favourite, $7.
Yep. There you go.
Connor O'Sullivan, and Sam Laylaw, who was obviously the
he's
number
up
one
there,
pick,
yep.
he's $10, so he's well above that. So Levi Ashcroft is a hell of a player too. Geez.
Gamble responsibly. All right.
Don't gamble at all would be my tip. AJ, working backwards from your question, I personally can't see AJ and JVR in the same team.
No.
I loved AJ's effort in this game, but it's like, and so much the coaching staff, and and that goal we kicked was awesome, and it must be said that it was a brilliant kick to Melksham to set up the goal to not. He was going for goal and completely shanked it. I'm a bit torn on AJ. I love his competitiveness. I love that sort of effort and energy, but he's not really giving Maxi that big a chop out. Maxi's still in the ruck, a hell of a lot of the time. So, I can't. Yeah, I'm a bit torn on him. So I love his effort, and I love his attitude and the way he's playing. It'd probably be good to see him get a good run of senior games, though, to really let him feel like, to get that confidence up. I just can't see him and JVR being in the same team, because you need a second ruck. He's the second ruck. I think we just wait for Luke Jackson to come back, and then Bob's your uncle, and then we won't have to worry about AJ.
Can he come back after the bye?
Deserves another crack at it, but
is he just in the team? Is AJ just in the team because they're punishing JVR or punishing? But,
I think it's one or t'other, to be honest. And I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit unfair, but he strikes me as a really good VFL player, and not quite an AFL.
We've got a lot of
player,
those.
But, Cam Pedersen is a really good comparison that's made a fair bit, and he was awesome for the D's, Cam Pedersen. And look, to be honest, if he's going to play a forward chop-out ruck role, he's got to kick some more goals. So if he's not kicking a goal, 2 goals a match, he kicked one in this game, and it was a really important victory. And it was him all over, wasn't it? It was just effort and grunt and want to get to that ball. And, Goody must love that. So, I think that he's everything that Jefferson needs to copy, and to look at how he goes about his footy. Put it this way, I want him to make it, but I'm not convinced that he's in our best 23 when we've got everyone up and running.
The best part about AJ in this particular game was they played him as a ruck, not as a full forward. He got limited time on the ground. It was almost like he was being played off the bench all the time, which is what they didn't do with JVR. The beauty of what they did in this particular game compared to what they did with JVR was the flow-on effects. All of a sudden, Petty is taking contested marks in the forward line because he's not having to ruck, 15% of the game to cover for Max. So I'm fully supportive of AJ continuing in the ruck. you don't have to play him on the ground all the time because, let's face it, he's got limited skills. He has an enormous amount of energy and bullocking, and boy, do we need that at times, showing the others. I'd particularly love the celebrations post goal.
Yeah.
That really fired the rest of the team up, and that's been something that's been missing for the whole team for quite some time. That was when we suddenly realised, hey, we're in this game. We're going to win this game. There was something special in that. But utilising him as a proper second ruck, I think, is the best thing for it because it relieves the duties of others, and particularly JVR. I doubt that we'll see him back after this week, and particularly also that Sydney are running two rucks. As well. We're going to need two rucks because they've got Laddams and Grundy rucking. So AJ is our second best option.
Yeah, and you touch on a really important point, George, is like the player ratings, as I said, there's just another data point, and it's not the be-all and end-all of where players are ranked in the game. And one of the things it can't really, by definition, sort of factor in is exactly what you touched on, is energy that players bring. And that sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, but that intangible sort of zing or something that some players bring. There's no way of measuring that. But the other thing I like about them is, as I've said before, the player ratings is that can sort of disabuse you of your confirmation bias. And I just went to look at the numbers then to say, oh, well, he had a poor, statistic player rating game, thinking that's what I would find because that was how I viewed his game. But his player rating was actually pretty impressive. So 7.8, I gave Judd McVie a big rap for the performance on Cameron, for shutting out Cameron. Aiden Johnson had 7.8 player rating points. Judd McVie had 7.9. AJ was above Sparrow, Langdon, Fritsch, May, Charlie Spargo, Xavier Lindsay, and Harvey Langford, and Caleb Windsor, Harry Sharp, and Harrison Petty in terms of his player rating. And so just on those numbers was a lot more impactful on the game than I'd given him credit for. But I think that's a really important point, George. You can't underestimate the importance of his energy. It was infectious watching it on television, just his effort level. And as I said, that goal he kicked was almost like a manifestation of that effort. He just wanted that ball, was there, booted it off the ground. That was a shocking bit of defensive work by the Lions, I have to say. But, so you're right, two ruckman. I hope he gets another crack at it this week. We'll talk about that later, I guess.
I think he needs to wear a helmet so I don't mistake him for Max.
He looks like, what's those Russian dolls? He could just about fit in.
Babushka doll.
Yeah.
Track Forever writes, how good was Melksham on Andrews today? And Leave It to Diva says, Melksham seems to have returned to the form we originally recruited him for. Do you think his injury and time away gave him a fresh perspective? Does that happen often with older players? He looks rejuvenated. Mandalorian says, despite a couple of undisciplined moments, I thought Melksham was instrumental in our win today. He plays a defensive forward role so effectively that Brisbane had to shift one of the league's best defenders to full forward. I still can't believe he was managed for the game against the Hawks. He would have been the ideal matchup for Sicily. He has to stay in the side. And Jaden, JH10 says, I'll give credit where credit is due and say that I wrote off Melksham a month back. Spirit of Norm Smith says, Jake Melksham, his goal kicking won the game. It gives us confidence. His kick on the left to hit Sparrow was superb, as was his pass to Langdon in the last. Great game to kick for and to nullify Andrews. And legend has it that Harris Andrews is still being extracted from Jake Melksham's back pocket. George, what did you make of Jake's game and his importance to our forward line setup? And I can't believe he was managed in that Hawthorn game. We could have used him.
Yes, and indeed. Look, we've been critical of Jake in the past, and he seems to have overcome all those, or taken on all those criticisms, because he is in everything now. And this was a game where he was an absolute pain to Harris Andrews, which was delightful to watch. But he just didn't let him out of his sight. He didn't give Andrews the opportunity to be that spare in defence to get those intercept marks. Every time Andrews was trying to do something, Melksham was right in his back pocket, exactly what he was doing, which is what we wanted him to do, in the past. Whereas before, he'd be looking for a cheap kick out the back or something along those lines. His kicking is just magnificent, and as Binman said, we don't have a surfeit of great kicks in the side, but he's probably one of the best. And those couple of kicks that we've highlighted before to Sparrow, and even the one over his shoulder to Langdon were just brilliant to see in action. So, the other thing I think, when Binman was talking about tactics before, I think we actually isolated our forward line a little bit more so in this game. The worst thing for Harris Andrews is to be one-on-one with someone.
Yeah, we created the one-on-one.
And it wasn't just in this circumstance. There was a couple of other occasions
where Cozzy mark. That was a great mark. That pushed him out of the way.
We haven't seen any of that really up to this point. Some defences won't allow you to do that, but we certainly isolated players. Fritsch and the half forwards were moving much further up the ground. Even Petty was moving up the ground and leaving people like Melksham all alone with Harris Andrews. So that was great. It was great to see a great return, and hopefully he doesn't get managed in the coming games.
He looks ripping, Nick, doesn't he? He got 8 coaches' votes. So Maxi got 10 again.
The coaches' votes were out. What did he got?
The coaches' votes were
8 to Max 10.
10 to Maxi.
Is Maxi leading the coaches' votes now?
I don't know. I'm reading off Wheelos, but 10 coaches' votes to Maxi. Jake Melksham got 8. Zach Bailey, who I love, I wish he'd come to Melbourne, he got 6. Track got 3. Bowie 2, and Cozzy rounded it out with a vote. Which, by the way, tracks with the player ratings. Almost exactly.
They've got, I'm just looking at the leaderboard. Max is not leading. He's coming third.
Well, Trent
Christian
Rivers
Cherry.
didn't get coach's vote. He's a bit unlucky. Clayton Oliver doesn't track with the player ratings that well. Almost does.
Christian Cherry is leading. So maybe Max won't get that All-Australian. That's going to be controversial.
Huh. Maybe he'll win the Brownlow, Jerry.
Well, there you go. All right. D-Minion writes, I rate Daniel Turner very highly as a forward prospect. He's got strong hands and he's more reliable set shot than many of our current key forwards. That said, he's also a very impressive defender. He reads the play exceptionally well. He's strong overhead, clean at ground level, and composed with ball in hand. I genuinely think he has the makings of a top-quality backman. What I really like is the flexibility that he and Petty provide. Both are capable of swinging forward or back depending on the needs of the game. But for now, I'd keep Turner in defence and leave Petty up forward. Jaden JH10 says, Daniel Turner stays down back. He has been our best defender. End of story. Binman, Daniel Turner, how'd you rate his game, and where do you see Disco's value for the team, forward or back, particularly with Lever on the cusp of return?
I really, really like the idea of him as a swingman. I personally think his best position is defence. He's really remarkably agile for such a big fellow, and that's evidenced by his ground ball gets. His post-clearance possessions in this game were 8, so he's tough over the ball. His post-clearance ground ball gets. He had 8 post-clearance ground ball gets, and by way of comparison, Jasper Fletcher had 6. So, he's really good when the ball hits the deck. Like George mentioned before, I love how he reads the ball in flight and marking. That's his one wood. He's marking. He's a beautiful mark of the footy. That mark he took running back with the flight of the ball.
Yep.
One out, I forget who his opponent was a really, really good mark, but it was also at a critical point in the game. It's on those sorts of, they score a goal there, and I fully expected, one out running back with the flight of it. The ball hits the deck. He's one out against, from memory, it was a smaller, one of their sort of medium players. The ball hits the deck, they get a goal, and, who knows, that's game over maybe. You just don't know. And I thought he was terrific. And like George said as well, his ability to evade tackle, he's got sort of a funny, laconic like he moves, or maybe it was you, Andy. He moves laterally really quite neatly, and seems to be unflustered. He's difficult to. He seems calm under pressure. It's really important to remember we got him in a mid-season draft, didn't we?
Yeah.
So I mentioned this at the beginning of the season when I tipped him as our breakout player. He's only now had 2 full AFL pre-seasons. 22-year-old, I think, from memory. Those sort of builds, those sorts of players, key position defenders and forwards, don't hit their strap to 25, 24, 25, 26, which I think is really important both for him and also for JVR, to be honest. He's got a huge future. I really, really like the way he's building into this season and becoming a really important player for us.
I thought the commentators were very harsh. At that fresh, airy shot, fresh, airy punch where he should have punched on, he sort of got nudged out of the way. And Darcy, who's the Darcy?
Gardner.
Gardner.
I don't know what Jared Healy's on, but
they were so harsh on him.
Jared Healy kept on calling him Darcy Fort. It's like, mate, Fort.
They do look a little bit similar at times. So but
it is his job to commentate on the game of football.
No, it is.
For
yes.
God's sake, like he's got a number on his back as well for reference. Jesus.
I thought that was harsh.
And what was the bit tough on Turner was that really the issue wasn't Turner. It was what happened right before that. It was some appalling defensive work that gave up that. So there were some funny moments in the game where we made some real howlers.
We did. We really did.
And that was one of them, lead up to it. And so it just felt like a strange game in the sense that, like you said, Andy, at any moment I kept on thinking, God, they're going to open us up now. And it didn't. So. Just
because they were they didn't capitalise on a lot of those howlers, but some of their ball movement, it just was, oh my God, how are we going to beat this? But we did.
The other good thing I liked about Turner was his choice to come off his man time and time again.
Yeah.
Play that lever role of the punch over the back when nobody else, when you needed someone just to kill the ball.
Yeah.
He was doing that so brilliantly. He
did that twice, and I think actually there was something I was going to mention last week. I forgot. We didn't do that very well last week, I didn't think.
No.
And so that he was really important in us improving in that aspect this week, I thought.
Yeah.
And he's surprisingly quick for a big fella, and I reckon that speaks to what you're saying, George, about his ability to get across and be that third man into aerial contests. So, but we haven't been able to fully test this, but I really like the idea of him and Petty being able to swap ends and create.
Yeah, absolutely. Injuries will occur, not only injuries in game, but as well, and you've got another option. Both at both ends of the ground with both of them. So
absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Roast says, I was flummoxed by the decision to name Fritsch as the sub, given how one-dimensional his game can be. Fortunately, we avoided any injuries and were able to use him tactically. To his credit, I thought he had a real impact when he came on. His tackling pressure stood out, and he worked harder than we've seen in a while. Maybe the message has finally gotten through. Demon Spirit says, what did the panel make of Fritter as a sub this week? I wanted to give him a shout-out. I was sceptical again to see he'd been selected in the team, but I thought this was an awesome use of him. He came in with so much energy and did some really important things at a critical time. I'd be happy to have him as a sub again just until he gets back into his best form. It's a shame he didn't kick that second goal, but he looked happier this week with a role to play. Spirit of Norm Smith says, Fritter as our super sub. He looked energised and hungry. He ran hard, laid tackles, and even clunked some strong contested marks. Who was this guy? It was like shades of 2021 all over again. So, George, you've been critical, and we all have the last few weeks, of Fritter, his form and his selection in the team this season. It's been a bit baffling. How do you think he performed as a sub, and can you see him being played that way until he perhaps recaptures some more consistent form?
Yeah, I think Roastar, Demon Spirit, and Spirit of Norm Smith summed it all up. This was a completely different player from what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. As soon as he came onto the ground, it was also a nice tactical move, whether it was through needs or otherwise, I'm not quite sure, to replace Sharp. But when Fritter came on, it was earlier than what you would have expected. When he came on and he laid a tackle straight away, and was serious about laying the tackle. He chased, and which we have not seen from Fritter, certainly this season, that was a completely different player who was on the ground from what before. So, as who is it? As Rostar said, maybe the message has gotten through because the evidence was that it had. So, he provides an option. He provides us with what was needed. It'll be interesting with Melksham and Fritter on the ground at the same time. I don't know whether he's. You need to have him as a sub all the time, but it'll be interesting to see what they do this week with him. But or whether he needs to reinforce that you've got to play this for 100 minutes, not just half a game. We expect sort of this standard all the time. So it'll be up to him, but can't complain about anything that he did in this game.
Just a couple of to sort of back up or to follow on from what you're saying, George. 3 things. That tackle that you mentioned happened within the first minute of him being on the ground. And they even commented on it on the commentary about how sometimes the defensive acts can turn your team around. He was on the half forward flank on the opposite side to where the camera is looking out. There was a contest. He worked all the way up to the half-back flank. Like, he was involved on the half-forward flank for us in that play, if it's the one that I'm thinking of, the one that you're thinking of too. He then worked his way entirely up the ground to the opposite flank, the half-back flank, and then laid that bone-crunching tackle, and then the ball spilled out, and we transitioned the ball up the other end, and to be honest, I can't remember what we ended up scoring, but they even said on the commentary, it's those sorts of acts that can sometimes change the trajectory of a game, and it felt like that. Like, that's the point for those sorts of efforts. Like, he didn't, get holding the ball against him, but his effort and attack on the ball created a spillage that ended up being a chain for us to go straight up the other end. Really, really impressive. The other thing, just as a sub, there was a conversation I was involved in on Demonland about AJ being sub. I was saying, well, AJ you can't really have as a sub. He's too positionally inflexible. Yeah. And the comment was, well, so's Fritsch. But I don't think Fritsch actually is that positionally flexible. He can play a high half forward road at a pinch. So he was a direct replacement for Sharp. He can play tall if he needs to, which then you've got flexibility. If he plays tall, you could bring Petty to the defence, for instance, if that's who's got swapped out, so you can use him, move him around, and he can play as a normal half-forward flanker, so he could replace a Sparrow, so he can't replace a mid, but you could roll a Sparrow into the centre and he could take Sparrow's position at half-forward flank. So I think he's actually a really, really good sub. And it's the other point I just wanted to touch on that you said, George, was the time in which they brought him on. It was only halfway through the third quarter, I reckon, that they brought him on. He played 37% game time, I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying. And so they brought him on pretty early. Obviously, Goody wanted him, involved, and I don't think Sharp had... it wasn't terrible by any stretch. So, I thought it was a terrific game. That's the benchmark, isn't it? That's that's the floor. That's where he's got a springboard from. He had a bubs, a month ago. Maybe he's getting some better sleep now, and but that's the absolute benchmark for him. And it was great to see him also enjoying it as well.
Spirit of Norm Smith says, Melksham aside, our goal kicking is shaky. Sharp, Spargo, Petty, Track, Cozzy and Fritter all miss shots from close range. Do you think we have a technique or a confidence issue? The big man once again, set shot goal kicking, it's our Achilles heel. I'm saying it all year in the last couple of years, technique or confidence?
Technique, number 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 technique. And then, of course, if you could get a bounce if you're feeling more confident, but it's, any variable, as we've talked about, it's the same in golf. Like, I was watching PGA this morning, and Scotty Scheffler is like, he looks like a hacker, and he just doesn't miss the bloody ball. His technique is so incredibly sound, even with the way he slides his foot around, it's so incredibly sound that with that when he's not confident, he hits the ball well. When he is confident, he hits the ball better. No one in world golf is able to hit the ball like him in the wind. No one is able to overcome those sorts of variables. The same in footy with golf, with kicking. Your technique, it's all about technique, and technique will be some mitigating, factor against wind and pressure and fatigue and conditions and rain. And, the better the technique, the more the players will be able to overcome that. So 100% technique. It's really, I think we've talked about this a lot, but very few AFL players, by the time they get to the AFL, it's incremental after that. At D's, I can think of Langdon's improved his kicking, but it's still not brilliant. It's gone backwards in some ways from its high of last year. The only other one really that jumps to mind in the whole time I've followed the D's, I reckon, maybe is Jones. I think Jones really improved his kicking, but really there's not many players who so probably being a bit harsh on Choco last week, but, in terms of the call of making him senior coach as well, don't put up your record of being the kicking coach in your, drop that from your resume if you're going to go for a senior kick. But yeah, so it's technique is, I don't have any doubt about that.
Yeah, we've talked about this time and time again, haven't we? And it was the same in this game. We could have easily thrown that game away with, or more importantly, we should have had that game sewn up a lot earlier.
Yeah, we should have.
What it was. We had,
and it's not just the expected score; it's when we miss them. Like Sharp's miss, that miss by Sharp, it's double. It's exactly like I mentioned last week. Some goals are worth more, some misses are worth more than others, and that was on the end of a brilliant bit of chain of moving the ball brilliantly to get it into Sharp. The way they moved that ball was how good he wants to play, and then Sharp misses it. And I think, maybe I'm making this bit up, I think they scored a goal not long afterwards from a set shot. You just think, oh, good Lord,
Yeah, there were a couple of times when we missed that they went down and a few minutes later even kicked a goal like from a similar position.
Yeah, flushed it.
So we don't know what to do. We're not the coaches, but there's still some very poor techniques that some of our players are exhibiting, and they don't seem to change.
No.
Max still has some very fundamental problems with the way he kicks. Petrarca's has got
Clary
some very fundamental stuff.
I mean, look at Clary's goal. I mean, went through the middle, but did you see the ball? But the ball was turning
on the flip side
way.
To that, and I've said this before. We've talked about this before. I do wonder whether the juniors coming through now, because of the way they get, such emphasis on football, that the best kicks are again rising to the top of the grade. And so to see Langford's technique is okay. Lindsay's technique is to die for. And the other player that's technique is really standing the test of time is Bowie. I mean, Bowie's kicking under pressure. He is just kicking beautifully. Even Salo, who's been up and down, but his kicking is getting better, and it's based all around good technique. The best technique I can, for the D's, two best players, just briefly, is Watsy and LJ. They're the two players, I reckon, with the best technique and low ball drop. It's fundamentals, isn't it? Putting the ball almost directly on the boot.
Which LJ are you talking about, Liam Jarrah or Luke Jackson?
Not Luke. Who am I saying? Travis, Travis Johnson.
TJ.
So,
Travis Johnson.
Not Luke Jackson. Not Joe Jarrah was a brilliant kick.
Don't badmouth a player that could be coming back home.
Yeah. And you watch Melksham, the way he hits those darts, like the ball, he's putting his hand almost directly on his boot. He's a terrific kick as well.
Red Jacket says, Clary deserves a lot of kudos for everything he's been through over the past 2 years. He's clearly faced challenges off the field, working to get both his mind and body right. On top of that, he's had to endure an incessant and often cruel media pile-on. To come back and embrace a new role is something that should be commended. The media seems to pick and choose which struggling players they target, and unfortunately our club and our players often seem like easy marks, while other clubs get a free pass with barely a mention. But I digress. Clary's form has been up and down, and perhaps other issues have affected his performances at time. Still, talent and class always find a way to shine through, and I think we caught more than a glimpse of that on the weekend. I love Clary. Spirit of Norm Smith says his third quarter efforts were special. Firstly, his contested ball and kick to goal, and secondly, his tackle, bump, and desperate knock on to Langdon to Cozzy for the goal. I love Clary. So, George, are we starting to see some glimpses of the Clary of old resurfacing?
I think we're starting to see a different Clary from what we've been used to seeing. Previously, it was all about possessions. It didn't really matter where they went in a lot of the cases, but we're seeing a different style. The commentators are all telling you that it was tagging on Lockie and Neil. They were just playing close to each other. Yep. But what the difference was that Clary's possessions were denying Neil the possessions that he would normally get. At the end of the day, apart from, I think Neil had a slight advantage in the number of possessions, but just about every other stat was identical. So Clary's doing his bit in the middle for us by simply being Clary in the middle and doing, delivering the ball that we need. Didn't notice too many turnovers from him. It's a much more precise sort of role that he's performing. It used to be, from what we remember a couple of years ago, is just get it, handball out, don't care about where it goes. It's another one. He's using the ball so much better than what he has. But the really telling one was in a similar vein to what we were talking about with Fritsch, was that knockout that he gave to that resulted in Cossie's goal. I can't remember the sequence. Was it where is it? The knock on to Langdon to go to Cossie, and then the goal. That was just pure guts, putting your heart and soul into it. And we were desperate for something at that stage, and he just got the ball out to be able to do that. That's probably something that we wouldn't have seen before. Previously, he probably would have dived on the ball and tried to handball it out to someone. That was playing
and then got caught, holding the ball.
Yeah. So we're seeing a different sort of Clary. May not be as prolific, but I think it's going to be good for him and good for the team as well.
Yeah, and probably the first time in his career he's been asked to do roles, and and I think that is great for him in terms of being defensively minded. Like, that's the thing the mids now have to be, don't they? They can't be all attacking, all out the front of the centre. They need to be defensively minded, and I reckon that's fantastic, George, about the idea of taking, like, sort of, there's X amount of possessions between Lockie Neal and Clary, and he gets the cream of those particular possessions. That's an interesting way of looking at it. And I mean, I'm just looking at what's his name numbers. Lockie Neal, he still had a game, 15.6 player ratings. That's a bloody solid game of footy. It was more than, for instance, Will Ashcroft and Bowie, but Clary had 20.1 or whatever it was. So I thought Clary, that was a it was a really important part of the match. And you're spot on that where he knocked out that ball that created it. That was one of those moments in the game where he had, it was just sheer effort, but it would have been really frustrating if we didn't score a goal, because I don't know if you recall, but we had a series of fumbles where we should have just got it through when we had players forward of that contest. It would have been one of those examples where, oh God, we should have scored a goal there and we didn't because we fumbled, and he made sure that we did score a goal. It was terrific.
Lazy says, I thought Track's game was underappreciated. I'd even say it was the best since King's birthday. 31 disposals, 9 clearances, 7 from the middle, 8 score involvements, 7 inside 50s. He also attended 29 centre bounces and played extensively through the midfield, so I found this extremely encouraging. What did you guys think, and did this game also fill you with confidence? A big man, I got a bit of 2021 vibes from Track yesterday. He seemed powerful and at his explosive best at times.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of went through it before, didn't I? Terrific, really. It just almost always, like, it's still, massive game of footy. Just a couple of fumbles, 2 or 3 fumbles where we had the ball where it looked like we were going to get out the front of it and we fumbled, and there was one where he fumbled and they ended up scoring their only goal, perhaps from the centre clearance. But I really, really like the way he's holding himself and his relationship with the young players. And as you mentioned, Andy, I really like how fired up he seems less passive in a way, like more wanting to impose himself on the game, not just with the way he's playing, which is his normal, but also verbally and physically. And, it can't be underestimated how hard it would come back from that injury he got. That was the two incidents that stick out in my life of following footy, three, are the hit that Lee Matthews put on Stephen Smith, Gussie's injury, and that injury too. I was sitting with George at that game because it was so evidently, clearly something was wrong. And then those three incidents, three terrific players, and hard thing to come back from. It looks like he's getting back there right in the right sort of space. That's his third or fourth really good game in the last 4 or 5 weeks track. So huge performance. And it makes you excited to go to the footy when you've got track up and about. If I was Goody, I would create some rules for track. One is don't kick under 30 metres, don't kick under 20 metres. Either kick at 70 metres or give it off, because speaking of technique, he's got a woeful kicking technique, and it lets him down when he tries those short passes. Having said that, he kicked the beauty to Spargo, who went back and missed it, unfortunately.
Speaking of punctured lungs, that's Jack McRae from St Kilda punctured his lung and played out the next 3 quarters or something. Couldn't fly back from Perth, and they were thinking they'd have to drive him back, but they've now given him they're allowing him to fly back now, but he's going to spend a night in hospital when he gets home.
I'm sure the AFL media vultures will be all over that.
Yeah, they should be all over it. I'm just looking on Twitter. There's barely, besides the actual just reporting of that, what I just told you, nothing. No, judge, jury, and executioner as they came for the Demons last year.
I've got no idea why they're even thinking about putting him on a plane.
Well, they've given him the all clear to do that, but they then said in that same thing that I just read from Tom Morris that he will spend a night in Epworth Hospital when he gets home.
Yeah, exactly. So, he might spend more than that.
Have they spoken to his parents? That's what I want to know.
Well, I don't know. And has anyone called him?
Has he got some roses sent to his...
Yeah, aeroplanes are only pressurised to 10,000 feet or thereabouts. They're not sea level pressurised, so I don't know why they're putting him on a plane. Sorry.
Said Jack McRae has a punctured lung. St Kilda considered driving him back across the Nullarbor until doctors gave him the all clear to fly to Melbourne tomorrow. He's then expected to spend at least one night in the Epworth Hospital.
Yeah.
That's the news.
Just witch doctors.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not a Melbourne player.
I wonder if the Dogs
I'd
did their
say
own
he's not
research
playing.
on...
That's not Dogs. That's St Kilda. He plays for St Kilda.
Oh, St Kilda. Yes, that's right.
Who are playing in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So he'll either make a miraculous recovery in 2 weeks. All right. Smurf says we've been blessed with some of the talent that we have unearthed in the last couple of years, and this year's crop in particular have been fantastic additions to the team. Langford has had a super start to the season despite a couple of uncharacteristic howlers yesterday. Equally as impressive, particularly yesterday, was Xavier Lindsay. He's going to be an absolute beauty. And Spirit and Norm Smith says Xavier Lindsay has such a bright future. His third quarter was special, a rundown tackle, a pass to Melksham inside 50 to goal, 11 possessions in the quarter, gave us momentum, still had run in the last, almost had a magical goal late. And Rostar says Langford and Lindsay were exciting, and even though Windsor was off, he's promising too. So last year was Windsor, last week it was Langford, and by George, this week it's Lindsay. And George, that's your cue.
Not just by George. Look, it's not surprising. We've got 2 very, very good players there. They were picked at the top end of the draft for very good reasons, but you can still miss out on that. Langford, I'm still... in awe of, and have been since I saw him first at pre-season training. His vision and capabilities are just absolutely elite level, and we've got a 18 or 19-year-old kid who's performing the way he is at the moment. I don't know what was his stats overall, Bim, and I recall at halftime he had something incredible in terms of...
Both had 19 disposals. I don't know.
Lindsay, did you mean? Or
no,
both of them did.
Langford
and Lindsay had
yeah.
19.
He ended up with, where is he? He ended up
19,
with,
let's
have a look. He had 11 kicks, 8 handballs, 19 disposals all up. So he went quite, his game on, time on ground was only, was pretty low. I'm just trying to find, I think it was in the 70s for both of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
They rested them a fair bit in that last quarter.
Yeah, that's what surprised me, because I seem to recall during the game I heard a statistic like it had 17 possessions or something ridiculous to playing on the wing, and then only got a couple in the last quarter perhaps or something. But
at 347 metres gained in a pretty low metres gain game, actually. That's pretty impressive. As by way of comparison, Tommy Sparrow 298. I know he plays higher up the ground, but they're using him in a really interesting way, I reckon. And a bit like I was saying, is they're creating a mismatch problem. If he pushes forward, he's a marking problem for him.
Yeah. That's the other advantage that Langford has. Is that he is a strong mark. He's just a strong boy at the end of the day. But he's capable. His kicking's superb. He's got a lot of depth in his kicking. His ability to see where to kick it to before he even knows where it's going, before he's even got the ball, is just elite. And there was one particular kick I remember from down the wing where he absolutely nailed it from 50, 60 metres away. It was just brilliant to watch. So, he's a beauty. Lindsay is a different sort of player, but again, just that pure, silky, smooth, perfect kicking action sort of players. He is the perfect winger. When you go back to the Robbie Flower days, he's that sort of player that he's going to be a 250 game player, and I suspect Langford's going to be the same. As was pointed out by who was it, Roaster, Windsor really dropped off in this game. Don't know why. Maybe it's 10 games in a row, just running out of steam in his second season.
And they didn't use him. Remember, I mentioned last week they were using him as handball receive a lot. He had like 16 or something last week. Yeah. He didn't get hardly any this week. And just on Lindsay, he had our second highest amount of metres gained for the game. So on top was Riv with 563, but he had 442 metres gained, which it's sort of, he's the sort of player who didn't even notice how influential he was in terms of that stuff. He just sort of rolls along like a expensive car. And the kick that he hit to Melksham inside, like that was just clever kick. Like he's not rushed, and it was the right option. Then he executes. It all looks so simple when players with going back to technique, when players with strong technique, combined with time and good thinking processes, it just all looks so simple.
Right, let's get on to the Casey game. The Casey Demons suffered a disappointing 41-point defeat at home to the Southport Sharks in a game defined by wasteful kicking and missed opportunities. And despite being competitive around the ground and even appearing the better side through much of the first half, Casey failed to capitalise on their dominance. Inaccuracy in front of goal plagued the Demons all day. That's a familiar story, particularly in the third quarter where they added 8 behinds without a goal, allowing Southport to seize control. By three-quarter time, Southport had turned a narrow half-time deficit into a 20-point lead, despite having significant fewer scoring shots. Casey's inefficiency contrasted starkly with Southport's clinical ball use and composure under pressure. The Sharks took full advantage of the Demons' sloppy disposal and decision-making, pulling away with five final quarter goals to seal a comprehensive win. Blake Howes was a standout for the Demons, racking out 30 disposals and 13 marks in a strong defensive effort. Mitch Hardy, 28 disposals, and Riley Bonner, 26, also contributed well through the midfield. Paddy Cross was the most effective forward for Casey, finishing with 2 goals, while AFL-listed players Jacob Van Rooyen, Matt Jefferson and Colton Tolstrup each added 1 major but had minimal overall impact. Their performances were labelled disappointing, with poor disposal and effort contributing to their team's struggle. Jake Lever made a successful return from injury, gathering 17 disposals and 8 marks in managed minutes. His presence was felt strongly in defence, and his absence coincided with Southport's scoring runs. Youngsters such as Kynan Brown, 19 disposals, 7 tackles, and Tajwell Woden, 22 disposals, and Jack Billings, 20 disposals, also battled hard but were unable to turn the tide. Tom Campbell won his ruck battle and received support from Will Verrill, but Casey's advantage at stoppages didn't translate to the scoreboard. In summary, while there were positives in contested work and individual contributions, Casey's inability to convert and their reliance on AFL-listed players who failed to deliver were costly. the Demons will need to improve their efficiency and lift their standards across the board to bounce back in the coming weeks. George, did you see any of the game?
Yeah, I watched the game. It was really, really disappointing. Just summed up everything that certainly in front of goal is going wrong. 8 points in a quarter when the opposition kicks 5 goals, 3 I think it was in the same quarter. Had how to throw a game away. The other really disappointing thing was we had 16 AFL players on this ground, 16, and Southport are a strong club in themselves, but they certainly don't have the AFL quality level players that we're supposed to have. It was interesting as you were reading that out that you point out that the best players on the ground were people like the Riley Bonners and the Mitch Hardys, and where were the Melbourne players? Blake Howes had a really good game down back. Lever was just so obviously far and above the level, and he's just so far. And every time he came on the ground, you could just see that he was marshalling the whole back line and getting to do what they are meant to be doing. But it was down forward. It was just appalling across. Jeffo did absolutely, utterly nothing again. JVR was putting in, but not very much at all. Campbell in the ruck was completely dominant, but that didn't translate into, unfortunately, anything up forward. But we had the opportunities in this game time and time again and just completely blew it. So,
what do we do with JVR? Because what happens if he just can't?
He will. Like every young player goes. Just look at all the other teams. Their players. Like, what's the Swans forward?
Amati. Logan McDonald.
But him and who did you say the other one?
Amati.
Yeah, Marty. Cadman. There's a surfeit. Reed. Now people have gone off Reed for Tracy's coming, but Tracy's a good, Tracy's 24 or something, like 23 or something. Amos is gone a mess. It's just the pattern for key position forwards. It's like, it's the one truism in footy that big men take time, and they just do. And it's just, improvement's never linear. So he'll get there. I have no doubt about it at all. I do have a doubt, I have to say, about Jefferson. My sort of starting point is to give everyone an even crack, but some of his efforts, and I went a bit hard on Colt on Demonland because I really rate Colt, and I reckon he'll make it. But I watched a quarter and a half, and I have to say I was really, really disappointed with not how he played. It's always going to be tough to go back down to the twos after playing in the ones for a young player, I reckon, but more his body language and his sort of, and some of his efforts. He got caught holding the ball where he took on a tackler. He didn't even take it on the tackler deep inside the opponent's forward line without any effort, really, and got pinged. It was like watching slow motion, and I just thought, I don't know, who knows what's going on? Maybe he was crook, maybe he was carrying a niggle or something. I don't know. So, I don't want to go too hard on a young bloke, and certainly I think he'll make it. But I just put a lot of stock in players who do get dropped to go back, and their effort doesn't, if anything, goes up a few levels. And let's face it, he's not like he was stiff to get dropped. It's not like he's got a legitimate case to, apparently JVR's attitude's been great. I only watched a quarter and a half. He didn't look like he impacted much in this game, but Colt's energy that he's brought to the senior team, which is what's kept him in the side, was noticeably missing in this game. And to me, that, he goes down a couple of notches in my estimation, because, as I've said before, I put a lot of stock in players' effort and attitude, and particularly in losing sides. So I hope he gets a rocket from Goody and from the coaching team, and I hope he responds this week, and it won't be in the ones, that is for sure. Just one thing from that game. Here's the positive, so leave that negative aside, is I reckon Seston's got a real future. Some of Seston's kicking in that quarter and a half I watched were excellent. He looks like he's getting closer to getting an AFL-ready tank. He moved the ball from end to end and tracked the ball pretty effectively in that time, and he's got that really strong kicking technique and ability to hit those key 20 to 30 metre kicks, the sort of angled ones, and not turn them over. So I really reckon big watch on him coming into the side in the next week or two.
Well, we'll ask this in a moment. Vice Captain Jack Viney should make his return to the team after missing 2 weeks with a concussion sustained in the round 8 match against the Eagles. Jake Lever had managed minutes at Casey, but he'll certainly be putting his hand up for selection. Neither JVR nor Colton Tolstrom set the world on fire in the twos, as you just heard, so they might not be in the selection frame. And Pingu says, selection this week should be interesting. Viney and Lever should be returning from injury if they are both deemed fit to play. Who comes in and who comes out? And Rose Star echoes that, saying selection's a tough call. Who makes way for Viney and Lever? So Big Man followed by George, who's coming in and who's going out for our match against the Swans. And I'll ask both of you if you think Lever has done enough in terms of, do you think he's ready injury-wise to come back? I don't know whether it's a fitness thing or just his ankle.
It's impossible to know on Lever. One thing, they never talk about it. Two, I don't know what the metrics would be, but I don't know whether I read this on Demonland or heard it from someone in the club or something, is that there was talk, wasn't there, of him spending a couple of weeks at least at Casey, wasn't it?
I can't remember, yeah.
But based on what George was saying on how we played, he comes back in for sure, doesn't he? It's not a must-win game, but, if we win this game, that's, 5 out of the last 6 games. That's an impressive run of,
Next 2 weeks are very winnable. Sydney and St Kilda, they're winnable games, and if we want to be in that frame, then we need to win these 2 games. We don't win these 2 games and forget about it.
So in which case, they'll be desperate to get him back in. So you imagine, it really frustrated me no end that Viney missed this game because of that concussion, and the Waller gets bloody 1 week off. They got to do that. That was really frustrating, and so he'll come back in, and I really like him coming back in. I hope they free Clary up now and use him maybe 65-70% as a real danger burst player at peak times and bring him on.
Well, we've got a question about that.
So who comes out? It's a really good question. Who comes out? Sharp seems to be the one that's, because he got subbed out. I think Fritter will stay in the side. I'm hopeless at doing this, so I'll leave it to George.
You don't have to.
Lever and Viney will both come back in.
Yeah, George.
I agree with you in that. I don't think there's any reason to leave Lever out. I mean, why would you play him more down at Casey? What would be the point? If you're playing him at all, he's ready to go. So, Lever and Viney come back in. I don't think Sharp's showing enough at the moment to warrant playing, and he's played a number of games and really hasn't had any true impact on the game.
You know what? If he'd kicked 2 goals that he had, it's a different story. But he did.
Well, it's also the distance he covers. We don't want to fall back into the trap of Nibbler. Forgetting how important it is his defensive spread and running is. But someone's got to come out if you bring 2 in.
Yeah. The other one was Spargo. I think we've got to start looking at Spargo. He's kicked 1 goal in 9 games. He's just not providing enough for us. And the third one possibly is Windsor. He really dropped off in this game, and I suspect either something's wrong or he does need a rest.
Didn't they rest him? Am I right to think they rest him at about this stage last year? Remember, he ran out of puff.
He got an injury. Got a really bad injury.
That was the last 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, that was later. But I thought around mid-season he ran out of puff a bit, and then they rested him.
So whether the same things happened again, or is very possible. But certainly his output in this game wasn't what we've come to expect of him. So 2 ins, and there's the 3 likelies for the outs. And I'd be keeping AJ at the side.
Yeah, I'd be keeping AJ at the side too. For much of the, like you said, Laddams and
Grundy.
and Grundy that to match up against them, but also that energy and effort. So,
well, following another disappointing grand final showing last year and the pre-season resignation of their longtime coach, the Swans have struggled to find consistency under new coach Dean Cox in 2025, and like the Demons, they've managed just 4 wins from their first 10 games, but sit only a game and percentage outside the top 8, just like us. With both sides desperate to stay in touch with finals contention, this match shapes as a crucial one. Now, before I get to George, followed by Big Man, their previews of this match, perhaps consider this question from D. Old Fart, who says, a couple of related questions for you to ponder, please. Over the past month, both Viney and Clary have played pivotal roles in limiting the impact of key opposition midfielders. With Viney likely to return from concussion protocols this week, who do you think is most likely to take on a run with or run off role against Sydney? Or will that responsibility be shared? Heaney and Warner are key playmakers in the Sydney midfield and are both in excellent form. One or the other seem to be likely to be the target of a run with role. So who do you think it'll be? Thanks as always for your hard work and passion. So who do I say is going first? George, followed by Big Man. Thoughts on the game?
Well, we've had Viney and Clary do the run with roles.
Yep. Yes, we won't say tagging.
So I don't think we need to pick one or the other. Both can do it. It'll be interesting to see. I think more importantly, what Sydney do from their side. Warner's pretty fast with off the mark, and I don't know that either Clary or Viney is the right sort of person to be taking Warner on. Heaney's the go-to man for everything, and I don't know how much time he'll actually spend in the middle. It'll be interesting because they've been absolutely ripped apart up the forward line, and they're depending on him being in the forward line more than in the middle. So, do we move on to the? I think Sydney are in no man's land at the moment. In a sense that they've got a seriously long injury list. Amati's been suspended for 3 weeks, courtesy of his bump this week. They've still got Cunningham out. Goulden is still out. Melican's out, suspended as well. Papley's out. McInerney's out. Francis got a concussion knock in the last game, so he'll be out this week. Whether Mills or Logan McDonald come back, they're tests, I think. So they've got a long list of players, but it's a lot of their talent. And watching them play this week, they utterly depend on Heaney getting something up forward. Like I said, Amati only comes in and out of the games, and Logan McDonald hasn't been around. So they've been using Heaney up forward to quite literally save the game for them. They just aren't what they used to be. Down back, I think we've got a relatively easy job of shutting down Blakey. If you stop him running up the ground, they just don't get the ball movement that they really love to use. So they're in a very vulnerable position this week, and if we play the similar sort of way as we did against Brisbane, we're in the box seat with this one.
Really, really interesting game. I've watched a few of their games this year. It's really hard to sort of, dip your toe in and work out what their game style is. They look they don't look to have carved out like a different plan under a new coach, and they're very much a front half footy contest team. They're number one in the AFL for clangers of all things. But their meat and potatoes, their strength has been their midfield. But they're really midfield, like they're mid-table. They're 15th, 12th in clearances per game, for instance. That was their one wood when they're up and about last year. They're not transitioning it from the back half. And if you remember at this stage last year, they hadn't lost a game yet. And, it was all about the Swans' ball movement from the half-back flank and the back half. And, they were supposedly going to be unbeatable. They haven't got much of that run and dash. Having said that, they're 5th in rebounds, 50s per game, but, they're not converting that to scores particularly. They have got a lot of injuries out, but that game on the weekend, watching it was very much like we're going to win through effort and contest, and it looked like Melbourne sometimes when so we've actually got very similar forward half game plans at the moment, and I think we're in better shape, to be honest, in terms of bringing the heat in the contest than they are. So it'll be a really interesting game. I think we match up really well. Even through our best period around 21-22, we struggled with the Swans. They match up well against us, but I think that there's good reason to be confident coming into this game, and I think it'll be interesting how Goody uses. I think that's a really good point about how Goody might use the question from DL Fart. There's no way you're putting Oliver on. Who's the player that was just mentioned? On Warner, he's just too quick, and he's too quick for anyone. I'd run. I don't know if you can run anyone with him. But where do you reckon, George? Which forward do you think that Melksham will go to?
Well, they don't have a great deal of options.
Which defender? Like, do you think he'll be used? What am I talking about? Do you think he'll be used to shut down? It's
McCartan's their main go-to man, but you certainly don't want the ball in the hands of Blakey.
Yeah, cut him out. He's not been. All teams are going to work on him this year, aren't they? Looking. So, I think the midfield battle will obviously be important, as it always is, because both teams are wanting to win those clearances, and both teams are going to want to win territory. But I'll be really curious to see if Goody brings another tactical sort of curveball to the game and does something different altogether than he's done in the last couple of weeks.
Well, we do have a caller on the line. Let's see how this works out. I think we got Redlegs 23 on the line. Welcome to the Demon Land podcast, and welcome back.
Good evening, gents. How are we?
We're great.
Fantastic, lads. Just what an amazing win. First off, it seems like it's been a minute since we've had, I don't know, just a big win against a big club. We've come very close. Over the last couple of years, especially this same fixture last year, where we pretty much did all we could but get the win up in Brisbane. So you could just see how much it meant to the boys and to see Gawn. I don't know, I saw some extended sort of behind the play footage, just watching the footy shows this week, and I've been seeing Gawn that pumped and that just absolutely elated with the win for a real long time. So you could see within the guys, it just meant so much. So just so wrapped for the guys to actually not fall short this time and actually, put it all into to play and get the win. So I'm just absolutely wrapped for the boys. And another thing as well, wrapped for Goody. I mean, this guy's, he sort of, after the Essendon game, most Melbourne supporters, or a lot of Melbourne supporters, were just about ready to move on from this bloke. And Goody's been through a lot. I mean, even early in his career when he was having the dizzy spells and then obviously he wins the flag, but he doesn't really he gets bashed in the media a lot. He's rarely given his flowers. And I think obviously a lot of the stuff that's happened off field is probably just tainted and just sort of, it's made it easy to forget that this guy, we've been unlucky in finals the last few years, we know that. But it's hard to be in the top four year after year. So I think it's just great to see that the media have jumped on his back in a good way after this one and actually recognised his coaching ability and what he's done for this club the last 5 weeks, because he was up against it. So just wanted to catch your thoughts on that, gents. But what a win.
It was a great win. I think that you're right about the top four stuff, but I think the straight sets exits sort of overshadowed the, particularly in the media.
Everyone's pumping up Fagan now, football. And they read out that their record is almost identical. 9 seasons, 1 flag. I think similar number of finals wins. Yet Fagan cops none of the rubbish that Goody does, and he's everyone's favourite avuncular bloody footy coach, and But a great call, Redlegs, on the win. I came inside, watched outside in the TV room. I said to my partner, "We won." She said, "Yeah, no kidding." I could hear it was such a relief to, as you say, win a proper big game against a proper big club. At the Gabba, we didn't have to hear bloody Country Roads, which was just an added bonus.
The commentators were salivating to hear.
Oh, they're gagging for it, and it's spot on. To be honest, it was such a guttural relief. I screamed at the end just to win. It felt I reckon as much as we missed our chances, I thought we played the last 3 or 4 or 5 minutes super smart. We ate up the clock, even Cozzy having the wherewithal to kick, not shoot for goal and to kick back. The game iced then. And so even when they got that goal on the rebound that the Irish guy got, that was frustrating. But I thought we were really clever in that last 4 or 5 minutes. And that no one seemed to mention that in the coverage or in the post-match coverage. I thought it was a really good effort by our senior players to make sure that we weren't going to lose that game in the end. And it was thrilling to get a win against, as you say, big club at the Gabba, premiership favourites, stuff them.
It's funny you say that, Ben Man, as well, because Jimmy Bartel was actually bringing it up on one of the footy shows, I think it was last night, how they pretty much went back to round one against GWS of how we should have played the last couple of minutes. And when AJ had that shot and he obviously missed it, he was suggesting I'd rather just maybe even kicked it backwards, even 15 minutes, just to literally soak up more time. And then they obviously reverted back to last night, how there were lessons that were learned. Because as you said, Pickett could have gone for the shot, but he's opted to
he used up all his time, didn't he? And passed it backwards.
Yeah.
And Maxi I think he passed it back to Maxi, who also looked like he was going to pass it back.
Yeah. So it was just great to see that was picked up. We learnt it obviously as a coaching group. It was just good to see that Jimmy, he's being pumped up at the minute for it.
Good on him.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Redlegs. Really appreciate the call, and we'll speak to you soon.
Good on you, Redlegs.
Awesome, pod. Thanks, gents.
Thank you. That was Redlegs 23, and I think that's where we're going to leave it for tonight. We'll be back next week to break down the round 11 match against the Swans. I think we've got a clear day. I think it says that it's going to be windy, but no rain on Sunday and probably cold-ish.
We're still outsiders, but just 205 to win this match, and it'll come in, is my tip, and it'll come into even money.
18 degrees, and I think windy late in the afternoon, but might not affect the MCG as much. We'll be back next week if you want to listen to the show live as it happens, and please head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8 p.m. And thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. That was Cassian66. Thank you to our Facebook commenter, Victoria. And thank you to our caller, Redlegs23, who just called in. And usually have a long list of everyone who wrote into the show, and I didn't take it down, so I'm going to go down my list now because you guys took the time to
shout
to
out
write
first
in
to
today.
Shout out first to Doug Reamer, who's in hospital listening to us at the moment. Got attacked by a dog.
Bit by a dog.
Jesus.
What, one of the Footscray players, or that would be newsworthy.
Thank you to our Demonland posters who posted questions. Clintosaurus, Garbo, Red and Bluebeard, Harvey Wallbanger, Bigfoot, Track Forever, Roastar, Spirit of Norm Smith, Dutch Demons, Lefty, Leave It to Diva. Man, some of them are asked more than one question, so I've got to skip them. Mandalorian, Jaden JH10, Dominion, Roastar, I've already said, Demon Spirit, Red Jacket, Lazy, Smurf, and D Old Fart. Thank you very much. And I think that's all we've got and Pingu. Pingu asked in the selection part of it. Thank you to all you guys. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and Bin Man. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on our podcast, and read it out on next week's show. Go Demons.
Red Leggers.
Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons. Come on.